الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We were discussing that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is trying to prove that Sahih al-Bukhari has preference over Sahih Muslim and has merit in each of the 5 qualities of a Sahih narration. So we discussed the first 3 qualities, and we have explained whether Sahih al-Bukhari really does have that or it does not have. Now moving on to the remaining 2 qualities, Allama Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَأَمَّا رُجْحَانُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ الْعَدَالَةُ وَأَمَّا رُجْحَانُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ عَدَمُ الشُّذُوذِ وَالْإِعْلَالِ فلأن من انتقد على البخاري من الأحاديث أقل عددا ممن انتقد على مسلم. So he's saying that if you have to look at the amount of ahadith which have been criticized. So previously we discussed the amount of narrators that have been criticized. Now looking at the amount of ahadith, because you could have one narrator mentioning 5 ahadith, or one narrator quoting 10 ahadith. So looking at the amount of ahadith which have been criticized, so he's saying that the amount of ahadith which are criticized in Sahih al-Bukhari are less than the amount of ahadith which are criticized in Sahih Muslim. So to verify this here, we see that the amount of ahadith which have been criticized in Sahih al-Bukhari are 110 narrations. And the amount of ahadith of Sahih Muslim which have been criticized are 132 narrations. So from here you can see 132 is more than 110. So there are more weak narrations in Sahih Muslim, and that makes Sahih al-Bukhari stronger. That is the point which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is making here. But obviously you have to work out the percentage, because if there's 132 from 20,000 ahadith, whereas there's 110 from 5,000, then the percentage would be more. So to work out the percentage, we have to look at the total amount of narrations of both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So there are various ways to count, and scholars have counted the ahadith in different, using different methodologies. Sometimes due to the difference of manuscripts, they reach the different conclusions. Sometimes due to different riwayat. Also, when Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim narrate 2 similar ahadith, are they counted as 1 or are they counted as 2 separate ahadith? So there are different numbers, you will see different totals. But for now, obviously we're not going to go into all of those details and all the different counts. But if you just take the amount which was given by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah for Sahih al-Bukhari, so he says that when he counted the ahadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, he found that there are 7,397 narrations in Sahih al-Bukhari. So 7,397. From 7,397, if you have to say there are 110 which are criticized, that would mean that it's only 1.5% of the narrations which are criticized. And this here is taking the amount of Ibn Hajar. Obviously, like I told you, there are other counts as well. So if you take those counts which are higher, for example, some scholars have counted 7,563 narrations, then the percentage drops. If you look in Sahih Muslim, there are about 7,385 narrations. This is amongst other views, because you have other scholars who will have different views. So if you say that there are 132 narrations, then it means it's 1.8% of the narrations of Sahih Muslim which are deemed weak, according to others. So obviously, percentage-wise, although it's 0.3%, but the amount of ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari which are criticized are less compared to the amount of ahadith of Sahih Muslim which are criticized. So even though this percentage is 0.3% is so little, but then the point which Ibn Hajar is making still stands. And then you find that for with regards to Sahih al-Bukhari, that although you have other scholars who try to say that there is a weakness in the narrations, when you do an investigation, you do a research, you will find that there actually is no weakness in the chain of transmission. But when it comes to Sahih Muslim, then this has not yet been proven. So now look at the choice of words. We're saying not yet being proven. So it's someone who still needs to do a proper tahqiq and look at all of those narrations of Sahih Muslim which have been criticized, and then do a a detailed research and find whether those who criticize the narrations are correct, or whether Imam Muslim rahimahullah was correct in mentioning these narrations in his Sahih. And then also besides that, it will also have to be checked whether the narrations which are criticized in Sahih Muslim, are all of them mentioned usulan, or are some of them mentioned mutaba'atan. Because we know that Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he purposefully brought ma'lul narrations to indicate sometimes to the hidden defects. So Al-Maqasim in Kutub Bukhārī mentions here that in arada alladhina akhraja anhum Muslim fi ghayr al-mutaba'at wa man laysa maqrunan bi ghayrihi fa mamnu' bal huma sawa' liman tatabba'a ma fi al-kitabayn mutlaqan. So he's saying that if you have to actually do a research, you will find and exclude the weak narrations which are narrated mutaba'atan, then this point of Ibn Hajar rahmallah would not be correct. But if all of these narrations are mentioned, like I say, someone will actually have to do the research. If someone does the research and he finds that all the narrations of Imam Muslim rahmallah which have been criticized, they all mentioned usulan, then the point which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning here would be valid. Now again, here the question arises that how come there are weak narrations in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim? Last week we discussed why there are weak narrators. So when it comes to weak narrations, here there are various different answers which can be given. Mullah Fazlur Rahman, he mentions that the easy answer is that the grading of narrations is something which is ijtihadi, it's open to opinion. So it depends what conclusion you reach after your research. So while other scholars felt that maybe a particular narration is weak because of a certain reason, and it's actually, we'll give some examples, inshallah. Imam Bukhārī rahmallah, maybe he felt that those reasons are not strong enough to grade this narration as weak, and therefore he decided to grade it as authentic. So being a mujtahid, he was entitled to his view. And in fact, when we have to now look and go through the narrations which scholars like Imam Darqutni rahmallah, etc. have graded as weak, and then we look at Imam Bukhārī rahmallah bringing it in his Sahih, so we do an investigation, we will find that actually many times the reasons of Imam Bukhārī rahmallah are much more stronger, and ultimately you will have to grade that narration as Sahih. So basically it means that Imam Bukhārī rahmallah was actually more correct in grading them as Sahih. So let us look at, and obviously this here is, it's just very basic, but on what reasons that some scholars weaken narrations. So Al-Masuyuti rahmallah, he mentions in Tadrib al-Rawi, وذكر بعض الحفاظ أن في كتاب مسلم أحاديث مخالفة لشرط الصحيح بعضها أبهم راويه وبعضها في إرسال وانقطاع وبعضها في وجادة وهي في حكم الانقطاع وبعضها بالمكاتبة. He's mentioning that there are various reasons that sometimes they said that this this here is a mubham, there's a mubham narrator in the chain, there's a person whose name who we don't know who is being referred to. At other times they said that this here is a mursal narration. So if you have to look like this here on a mursal narration, one example. So we know firstly that majority of scholars accept mursal narrations if there are conditions which are fulfilled. So if you have to look at this narration which are mursal, many times the marasil of Sahih al-Bukhari, when you go through Hajj al-Sari, you will find that Ibn Hajar rahmallah proves that they were narrated muttasilan. So a mursal narration, for those of you who are doing Nuzha the first time, it's where a tabi'i is narrating directly from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he's leaving out the name of a sahabi. But when a tabi'i is narrating from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it does not necessarily mean that he's leaving out a sahabi. It could be that he's narrating from another tabi'i, and that tabi'i could be reliable or he could be weak. That tabi'i in turn could be, and we'll do this whole, we'll do a chapter on it. So therefore some scholars have felt that it is weak because you don't know that the name which he is dropping off, whether it's the name of a sahabi or whether it's the name of a tabi'i. So to give one example, Imam Bukhārī rahmallah, he narrated via Mus'ab bin Sa'ad radiyallahu anhu, the hadith that هَلْ تُنْصَرُونَ وَتُرْزَقُونَ إِلَّا بِالضُّعَفَائِكُم. So on this particular narration, Imam Darqutni rahmallah said that it is a mursal and therefore it should be weak. and Imam Bukhārī rahmallah could not have narrated it. However, Ibn Hajar rahmallah responded and said that suratuhu suratul mursal illa annahu mawsulun fil asl ma'rufun min riwayat Mus'ab ibn Sa'd an abihi, that he narrated it from his father. That yes, in Sahih al-Bukhari it is narrated with this mursal chain of transmission. It's not proven here in Sahih al-Bukhari that he heard the narration from his father. But when you look at other sources, you will find that he actually is narrating this from his father. Sa'd radiallahu anhu is narrating it from Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So from here you can see that the minute amount which we have, 1.5 to 1.8% of narrations which are weak, there are answers given to some of them. So this here already reduces that already small amount. Then at times a narration has been said to be weak because there is istirab. That some scholars have pointed out that it seems like this narration is contradicting another narration. So obviously if there's a contradiction, it means that there will have to be an error. So if you take a closer look, you will find that it is possible to give preference to the one over the other. At other times, maybe you can even combine the two. You can understand them maybe also as referring to two totally different incidents. So many of these seemingly contradictory narrations, Ibn Hajar rahmallah will say, أخرجه على الاحتمال, that Imam Bukhārī rahmallah, he has narrated it because of choosing this narration. Or so Imam Bukhārī rahmallah basically had a valid reason for narrating that. So for us as an onlooker, for us with our little knowledge in Ḥadīth, it will seem like there's a contradiction. But for Imam Bukhārī as an expert in the field, he knew why he is narrating this Ḥadīth. So the point which we're making is that firstly the amount is little, only 110 narrations in Sahih al-Bukhari, 132 in Sahih Muslim. But from those you can already knock off so many. So this here will already reduce the amount so much. But in spite of all of that also, Allah Ta'ala loves justice. So we have to admit that in spite of trying to respond to each and every of these narrations, there are still just about 4 or 5. So the amount of fingers of one hand you can count them. 4 or 5 narrations from Sahih al-Bukhari, which will have to be graded as weak. For example, after trying to respond to one narration, Ibn Hajar rahmallah, first he brings the whole i'tirāz of Darqutni rahmallah, and after that he says, هو كما قال وعلته ظاهرة والجواب عنه فيه تكلف وتعسف. So he mentions this here in Hajj Sari on page 374, mentioning that here Imam Darqutni actually has a valid point, and it's clearly that there is a defect here. And in trying to respond, in trying to avert this defect, there is just a takalluf. Likewise, at another place, Ibn Hajar was again then forced to admit, because now, his objective was to defend Imam Bukhari. He would go to any extent, whether it means bending principles, whether it means, no matter what it meant, but he had to defend Imam Bukhari. But so that's why we say he's forced to admit. He says that, والله أعلم فهذا جواب إقناعي وهذا عندي من المواضع العقيمة عن الجواب السديد ولا بد للجواد من كبوة والله المستعان. He's saying that every fast riding horse will have to one day fall. So like that, Imam Bukhari rahmallah, in spite of being such an expert, but here these 1-2 rare places he mentioned a narration which is weak. So we do not deny that there are very few narrations which are weak. Like Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions in his Nukat that إذا اعتبرت هذه الأمور من جملة الأحاديث التي انتقدت عليهما لم يبق بعد ذلك ممن انتقد عليهما سوى مواضع يسيرة جدا. So he didn't say that all answers have been given to each and every one. He clearly mentioned سوى مواضع يسيرة جدا. So yes, there are a handful of narrations which are weak, but firstly, the weakness is not so severe, and secondly, because of that very few narrations which are weak, like we say, you can count them on one hand, you cannot discard the entire kitab. Now, after trying to prove that Sahih al-Bukhari excels in every condition, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying that let's look at it from another angle. So until here we proved from the kitab itself that the narrations are stronger. Now he's saying that as a person, Imam Bukhari rahmallah is far greater than Imam Muslim rahmallah. So what he says هذا مع اتفاق العلماء على أن البخاري كان أجل من مسلم في العلوم وأعرف بصناعة الحديث منهم وأن مسلما تلميذه وخريجه ولم يزل يستفيد منه ويتبع آثاره حتى لقد قال الدارقطني لولا البخاري ما راح مسلم ولما جاء. So he's saying that that until now, from the kitab itself, you found that Sahih al-Bukhari beats Sahih Muslim in every one of the conditions. He's saying, but then also take into consideration that Imam Bukhari is a greater expert in this field compared to Imam Muslim, rahimahullah. And he is he excels much more in this field of Hadith. So now here, to understand what point he is trying to make, you will have to first look at the source from where he is getting this here. Because you might think that, okay, Imam Bukhari is much more greater, but what does that have to do with the authenticity of the kitab? So when we go back, we find that he's actually deriving this here from Imam Nawawi rahmallah. So Imam Nawawi rahmallah, in his commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari, he started to write his commentary on Sahih al-Bukhari and did not complete it. So he mentions there, من أخص ما يرجح به كتاب البخاري اتفاق العلماء على أن البخاري أجل من مسلم وأصدق بمعرفة الحديث ودقائقه وقد انتخب علمه ولخص ما ارتضاه في هذا الكتاب. So you see these last disclosing words here. وقد انتخب علمه ولخص ما ارتضاه في هذا الكتاب. This here explains the reason of mentioning this point. Because otherwise, like we said, a person can wonder, does Imam Bukhari being greater than Imam Muslim, what does that have to do with the kitab of Sahih al-Bukhari being more authentic than Sahih Muslim? Because there were so many earlier scholars before Imam Bukhari who are from Khairul Qurun, who are greater than Imam Bukhari. Yet we don't choose their kitabs over Sahih al-Bukhari just because of that. No one will ever tell you that Muwatta Imam Malik. Yes, there are scholars who prefer Muwatta Imam Malik over Sahih al-Bukhari. Shaykh Awama, he prefers Muwatta Imam Malik over Sahih al-Bukhari. So there are scholars who prefer it, but it's not based on that reason. It's not based on the reason that Imam Malik was greater than Imam Bukhari, and therefore we are preferring the kitab. So the point which Imam Nawawi rahmallah is making is that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim Imam Bukhari was greater than Imam Muslim, and both of them set out to accomplish the same goal. So you see, scholars did actually make the objection, like in Yawaqit wa Durar, Imam Munawi rahmallah mentions that تعقب بعض المتأخرين بأنه لا يلزم من ذلك تفضيل التصنيف على التصنيف. That by one being greater than the other, it does not necessarily mean that that's a reason why you should give a preference for his kitab over the other kitab. But we're saying that they both set out to do the same goal, to accomplish the same task, to gather Sahih Ḥadīth. Now, when they both set out to do the same thing, if Imam Bukhari rahmallah has more experience in the field, and he has much more knowledge and is a greater expert, then obviously he will be able to do a better job. So it's like some, if you take an example, say in sports maybe, or like say, maybe someone who officially runs the marathon on an international level, and he also trains other as, and then you have another person who maybe in his school he runs, and he's a student of that former person. So if the two of them have to compete, then obviously you know who will win. So like that, Ibn Hajar rahmallah is trying to say, taking from Imam Nawawi rahmallah, that since Imam Bukhari rahmallah is greater than Imam Muslim, when they both try to accomplish the same job, then Imam Bukhari, with all his experience and his immense knowledge, he was able to accomplish a much better job. So he's saying that حتى لقد قال الدارقطني, that Imam Darqutni rahmallah has said, لولا البخاري لما راح مسلم ولا جاء. Had it not been for Imam Bukhari rahmallah, you wouldn't even have heard the name of Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So لولا البخاري, Mullah al-Qari, he likes all his rhymes. So he mentions there wujuduhu wajuduhu. So in the print actually they put a dhamma on both the waws, but on a one waw there has to be a fatha. So wujuduhu, the presence of Imam Bukhari, wajuduhu. And on the generosity, so when we are doing this here, our Ustad told us that to be a good teacher, that you can see Imam Bukhari was the teacher of Imam Muslim. to be a good teacher, if you have these two qualities, wujud and jud, that when your student needs you, you are there. So you're always there. Your student knows how to contact you, how to find you. Wujuduhu. Wa juduhu, and generosity. So juduhu, when your student asks you for something, then you are generous enough to give him whatever knowledge he wants. So this was the quality of Imam Bukhari, and that's how he made Imam Muslim, rahmallah. So here, Allama Akram Sindhi then explains the remaining portion of the phrase, Allama Raha Muslim wala ja'a. He says that this here is kinayatun an tasarruf. That if it had not been for Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim rahmallah would not become an accomplished scholar. Wala rusufa qadamin fihi. He wouldn't have become he wouldn't have learned and excelled in this field. So yes, we do not deny that Sahih al-Bukhari is more authentic than Sahih Muslim. If you ask any of us, we will say the same thing. Sahih al-Bukhari is definitely more authentic, but there is no need here to make takalluf and to try to prove that in every one of the 5 qualities, Sahih al-Bukhari excels. But on a whole, definitely, Sahih al-Bukhari is greater and more authentic than Sahih Muslim. Now, reverting back to the Taqsim al-Sab'i, you know, about 4 sessions back, we discussed the Taqsim al-Sab'i. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَمِن ثَمَّ أي من هذه الحيثية وهي أرجحية شرط البخاري على غيره قدم صحيح البخاري على غيره من الكتب المصنفة في الحديث ثم صحيح مسلم لمشاركته للبخاري في اتفاق العلماء على تلقي كتابه بالقبول أيضا سوى ما علل. So yeah, he's saying that based on this year, on all of these reasons which we have given, proving that how Sahih al-Bukhari is greater, even the conditions of Sahih al-Bukhari gets a preference over the conditions of Sahih Muslim. So to say that, he says, ثم يقدم في الأرجحية من حيث الأصحية ما وافقه شرطهما لأن المراد به رواتهما مع باقي شروط الصحيح ورواتهما قد حصل الاتفاق على القول بتعديلهم بطريق اللزوم فهم مقدمون على غيرهم في رواياتهم وهذا أصل لا يخرج عنه إلا بدليل. So here also there when he says in the previous paragraph he says سوى ما علل, it would have been better for him there to mention سوى من تقد, because سوى ما علل means that there is a illah, but like we explained that at times maybe Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, and actually most of the time Imam Bukhari rahimahullah was more correct. Now yeah, if you remember that we denied the Sahul Taqsim al-Sab'i, we said that Ibn Salah rahimahullah is the one who concocted it, and Ibn Hajar followed him, and from them it became so popular. Before them, no one knew about the Sahul Taqsim. So we ask here that, okay, in the first category, the very first category you put, and you said it's muttafaqun alayh, those narrations which both Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahullah narrated. Now if you remember when explaining muttafaq alayh, we said that it is that a narration where Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim narrate from the same sahabi. So they have one sahabi and they are both narrating from that same sahabi, that is muttafaq alayh. So now we ask that why not put the second category, those narrations which Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahullah both narrated, but from different sahabis. And you remember we even quoted Ibn Hajar in his Nukat. He's saying that when you look at it from a different angle, that here you have a mutaba'ah, so it could be stronger. So it's also narrated by Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. So why not put it as a second category? And if you're not putting it as a second category, then where does it fit? Because here is the next category, you are putting only those narrations which Imam Bukhari narrated. But this here is narrated in Bukhari and narrated by Imam Muslim. So you can see that firstly these 7 categories were made so late by Ibn Salah rahmallah, and then they are still open to some tweaks. Okay, and then he says that ثم يقدم في الأرجحية من حيث الأصحية ما وافقه شرطهما, that what fulfills the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim. So now what fulfills the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim? Ibn Hajar rahmallah explains لأن المراد به رواتهما مع باقي الشروط الصحيح. He's saying it refers to the narrators So this is what he mentions, that when someone says that a particular narration fulfills the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim, it does not mean, because remember again, that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, rahimahullah, they did not clearly mention their conditions. So basically here you have three different views. You have the first view that it's different narrators who have the same qualities. And this here was the view of Imam Hakim, rahimahullah, and in fact he based his entire Mustadrak on this here. So there are a few issues with this here. The first is that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, rahimahullah, they didn't clearly mention their views. So by you assuming, they didn't mention what the conditions were. So by you mentioning that this person fulfills the condition of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, and if Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim did not narrate from that particular person, then it's just based on assumption. Because you assuming that it fulfills the conditions, because we don't know what the conditions of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, rahmallah, really were. Obviously, Imam Hazmi and Ibn Tayyib, they wrote the kitab, many Ibn Manda, rahmallah, but still, it's not certain because they didn't clearly mention what the conditions were. You see those, all three names which I told you, Imam Hazmi, Ibn Tayyib al-Maqdisi, and Ibn Manda, rahmallah, they didn't mention this whole thing which Ibn Hajar, rahmallah, spoke about, mu'an'an narrations, etc. So like that, it was open to interpretation because Imam Bukhari, rahmallah, did not clearly mention his conditions. So that's the first view, but as you can see, it's very problematic. And that view is that it's different narrators who fulfill the same conditions. The second view is that it's the same narrators, but even though if it's not in the same sanad. So you're just looking at every narrator individually. You know, you pick up a kitab, you find that this particular person, Imam Bukhari narrated from him. So you said, okay, he fulfills the conditions of Sahih al-Bukhari. You're not looking at how Imam Bukhari, rahmahullah, narrated from him. So here is, as we have even mentioned on Saturday, that there are so many, 6 different ways in which Imam Bukhari, rahmahullah, and Imam Muslim would narrate. شاهدا ومتابعة معلقا مقرونا بغيره مخصوصا من بعض شيوخه and قبل اختلاطه. So there are these 6 ways. Now if you didn't take this into consideration, like, you know, مقرونا بغيره, or to look at these 6 conditions, if you have to look, Imam Bukhari, rahmahullah, and Imam Muslim, rahimahullah, they both narrated from a narrator who's called Hammam. Likewise, both of them narrated from another narrator who's called Ibn Jurayj. So, both Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim narrated from both of these narrators. But, they narrated from both of them separately. So, they would not narrate a narration where you have Hammam narrating from Ibn Jurayj. They only would narrate where Hammam is narrating from others, not from Ibn Jurayj. Because if Hammam narrates from Ibn Jurayj, then that particular narration will be weak. So if a person is unaware of this here and he grades a narration where Hammam is narrating from Ibn Jurayj as fulfilling the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim, then obviously it's going to be incorrect. Because purposefully Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim made it a point not to narrate those narrations where Hammam is narrating from Ibn Jurayj. In fact, look at another example. Both of them narrated from Hushaym. Likewise, both of them narrated from Imam Zuhri, but they narrated from both of them separately. And purposefully, they would not narrate narrations where Hushaym is narrating from Imam Zuhri. So if you're only looking at all narrators individually, then if you see a narration where you have Hushaym narrating from Zuhri, you will say that Hushaym is a narrator of Bukhari and Muslim, Zuhri is a narrator of Bukhari and Muslim, so this here has to be this is a narration which fulfills the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim. But Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, rahimahumullah, would not narrate such narrations. And this here is one of the main reasons how Imam Hakim, rahimahullah, made so many errors in his Al-Mustadrak, because he did not look at this here. You remember that statement of Ibn Salah, rahimahullah, which we quoted last week, وفيما ذكرته دليل على أن من حكم لشخص بمجرد رواية مسلم عنه في صحيحه بأنه من شرط الصحيح عند مسلم فقد غفل وأخطأ. That a person who, just because Imam Muslim narrated, he doesn't look at how Imam Muslim rahimahullah narrated, then he is negligent and he will make a mistake. Then the third way is that it has to be the exact same narrators and the exact same sanad. Because when you're looking at the exact same sanad, so you have a sanad which from Imam Bukhari, from his teacher right up until Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, each student is narrating from a particular teacher. That exact same sanad, if it is narrated in another kitab, then that is what you can call fulfilling the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim. So if you have the print of Sheikh Rahili, you will see he mentions in his footnotes that al-awwal mura'atu dhalika at-tartib bayna at-talamid wa ash-shuyukh al-warid fi as-sahihayn أي مطابقة الرواية لروايته بأن يكون التلاميذ هم التلاميذ والشيوخ هم الشيوخ. So it's very specific that the narrator, the teacher should be the exact same teacher from who Imam Bukhari rahmallah is narrated. It's in the exact same method that Imam Bukhari rahmallah is narrated. That is what the meaning of fulfilling the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim is. He says, وَرِوَايَتُهُمَا ورواتهما قد حصل الاتفاق على القول بتعديلهم بطريق اللزوم. So here he's saying that the narrators in passing, the طريق اللزوم, that's how you can translating, in passing that they were graded as reliable. Why? Because scholars all came and said that Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim are authentic books. So if they are authentic books, they can only be authentic if the narrators are reliable, and the scholars would only mention that statement if they inspected all the narrators. So therefore, by looking at that statement of theirs, we can say that they inspected all the narrators and found that all of them are reliable, and therefore they graded Sahih al-Bukhari as more authentic. Inshallah, we'll continue from here on Saturday, inshallah. Until then, jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.